Welcome back to another GTN Coach's Corner, where we answer your triathlon-related questions. This week, we'll be answering why do I have gut problems on the Ironman run?
How old is too old for a second-hand bike?
Should I focus on one sport, get good at that, and then come back to the others?
How to improve my cycling without affecting my running?
And I'm too nervous to eat before a race.
Yeah, so let's get straight into your questions. And the first one comes from Jack, 23, the dude. Hi GTN, I've recently completed my third Ironman and all of them I've experienced gut problems around a half marathon, 30 kilometers. The first was actually my best, even though I wasn't really counting my carb intakes per hour. And the last one, I really struggled in the running part with the nausea, and I was more specific about targeting 90 to 95 carbs per hour on the bike. And trained okay in long workouts during preparation, and about 60-ish grams on the run. So maybe it's a salt problem. I've also taken salt caps during the bike and run. Is it normal exhaustion due to poor training maybe on the run?
I mean, the thing that's jumping out to me here is that these are quite high numbers, and almost sounds like based on your question, you've sort of plucked these out as a bit of a guesstimate.
Yeah, 90 to 95 grams an hour, and you've just gone, well, I'll start there.
And even 60 on the run.
Yeah.
It's quite a lot for
those are on the high level, the high end of the spectrum as far as how much you can absorb. And I'm not sure where you got those numbers from, whether you were following some pros on Instagram and decided that's where you're going to get your numbers from. But they are high, and I would suggest that you bring those way down to 60 to 70 grams or so on the bike, and maybe 40 to 50 grams per hour on the run, and start there. And then if you find that your energy levels are dipping, you can take an emergency gel or two extra and make sure you have those in your pocket. But you're much less likely to get to the point where you have stomach issues. The issue is, of course, that you may very well be absorbing 80% of what you're eating throughout the race, but that means that 20% of what you're eating every hour is not getting absorbed. And by the time that accumulates to the point that you are very uncomfortable, you're halfway through the run. Mm-hmm. And if you've overeaten, as you've experienced, things fall apart, because what happens is your stomach stops absorbing anything at all, and you feel nauseous and you feel ill, and you are pretty much going to be walking your way in to the finish line. Whereas if you haven't eaten enough, you can boost that. So it's a much safer route to do it, and we would definitely suggest you start a lot lower.
Yeah, and you've mentioned obviously the 90-95 grams of carbs, and you may have seen videos where we talk about Leon Chevalier taking on 115, 120 grams of carbs per hour. We have actually put out a video fairly recently on our channel where we talk about how we train our gut and increase how many grams of carbs that we take on per hour. Obviously, there's some performance improvements and enhancements from being able to do so, but it does take time and training. You can't just jump in on taking 95 grams of carbs per hour tomorrow.
As you say, it is possible that it is something else, like too much salt. Too much salt can definitely affect your body's ability to absorb stuff because of the osmolality of the stomach contents. Essentially, if it's too high concentration, it will actually pull water from your body instead of the other way around. It could also be a sensitivity to one of the ingredients in the gels. It could be a certain sugar type or something that you struggle with, so maybe try some different gels. But I'm willing to bet that it's simply too much fuel. You are overfueling, and your stomach is getting to the point where it's just like enough, and waves the white flag, and you are done. Talking into the big white telephone as it is, as you say.
It sounds right to me. Right, next one then from Nick Vanman 1214. I'm looking to get my first TT or triathlon bike on the used market. I was wondering how old is too old for a triathlon bike. I'm looking to mostly benefit from the improved position. I've seen some from the early 2000s and was wondering if frame or body geometry has changed, or if anything else major that would discount an older bike other than aero improvements or a number of gears. As for tech 2x9 or later, I think he means work for me.
Yeah, I think 2x9 should work for him. And you don't need 12-speed gears so that you get super smooth shifting. 2x9 could very much work for you. As for like frame geometry and stuff, there have been improvements in frame geometry. I mean, there were TT bikes back in the day, and they did have fairly aggressive frame geometry, but there were also TT bikes that were essentially road bikes with aero handlebars stuck on them, and they had very slack seat angles, and you just will never get into a decent position on them. So be very careful what you buy, and if you're going back deep into the past. The issue you might find if you go really old bikes is compatibility. tech does become obsolete. There is tech that is simply no longer going to get the support that you need. You may not be able to find the parts. You may not be able to find replacement derailleurs or shifters or bottom brackets, even anything like that you are at some point going to have to replace. Even chains, decent chains. If you go 2x9, you'll be okay for a little bit longer. I don't think they're getting rid of 9-speed chains just yet. But you do need to be aware of that. That is definitely a factor. And then, of course, you have to bear in mind that there are tech improvements that you can't necessarily see. You may be able to see the frame shape and the aerodynamic shape of it, but you can't see what that frame is made of. And early 2000s bikes are made of floppy carbon fiber and aluminium that would kind of flex and bend in all the wrong ways and the wrong places. And these days, you'll find the tech is improved significantly and they stiff in the right places. And you can't measure that. Also, cable routing and those kind of things have improved drastically over the years. So be careful what you buy and make sure that you know what you're buying and what the actual tech of the bike, the hidden tech is.
Yeah, I guess easier said than done, but figure out your budget and essentially just try and get the latest and the best bike you can for the money. The thing that I'm always looking out for is the opportunities to upgrade with that bike, as James has said, things like the routing capabilities and things like that, because if you are planning on keeping this bike for a while, you want to maybe upgrade the gears, is that possible on that bike? So there's a lot to weigh up, and it really does depend on that budget and what you are able to get with that. But if you find yourself with that budget going further and further into the past and into older bikes, you may just end up picking up a bit of a lemon that really doesn't hit the mark.
This is the trap. If you go too much on the, I'm looking for a deal, you just keep going a year further back until you got a really good deal, but your bike's a bit too old. Or you might go the other direction and go, this is nice, I might get this, I just added a few more quid to this and it'll be even better. And eventually you'll be remortgaging your house to buy a $10,000 bike. So decide very objectively what your budget is and then find the best and latest bike you can buy for that budget.
Yeah. All right, next question, and I'm not even going to try and say this username because it's just a load of numbers and letters. I have a question. I am 14 years old and was wondering whether I should focus on just running for a couple of years with minimal swimming or cycling, enough to compete in triathlon, then try and do well at running in my junior years. Is this a good idea if I want to compete at a high level in triathlons when I'm older?
Whoa. No, absolutely not. This is definitely not the way to compete in high-level triathlons when you're older. You need to train for where the sport of triathlon is going to be, where you want to be at a high level in, say, 10 years' time. And at that point, I can tell you right now that the swimming at the highest level will be at such a high level that if you've taken a couple years off swimming in your teens, you will simply not be there with those swimmers. So if you want to be a high-level triathlete later on, you need to be really working on your swimming and your running throughout your teenage years. Obviously, you need to balance that. You can't be swimming ridiculous amounts that you can't bike or run, but you do need to be swimming as much as possible and running really well. As far as cycling goes, that is something that you can sort of pick up a bit later on, so don't focus too much on that.
Somewhere I'd say that juniors or youths can benefit is actually doing technical skills more so on the bike. And
so you can do one or two rides a week and just work on those technical skills. But as far as the swimming goes, definitely if you have any aspirations for triathlon later on in your life, you need to be working on that swimming and don't give an inch on that.
Yeah, I've actually heard this question a few times over the last few years, and I think it sort of comes from a lot of people seeing the likes of Alex Yee, Alistair Brownlee coming through the ranks, and all this talk about them being runners and that they have a history of doing fell running and all this sort of stuff. I need to point out, they also were triathletes from a very young age and actually doing a lot of swimming and cycling. They just so happened to be exceptional runners and were able to go to English schools and win the English school champs. Same as Jodie, your partner.
Yeah,
she was an exceptional runner, but also a triathlete from a very young age. And the way the sport has moved on in just the last 10 years, I'd hate to know where it is in another 10 years. And if you aren't swimming or cycling in your younger years and you hope to be at the very top in 10 years' time, well, you can have your work cut out.
Yeah, I mean, my wife was swimming 5-6 mornings a week and running at lunchtime and and then often swimming in the evening also throughout her teenage years. So yeah, you do need to be swimming. And I'm not just saying this as Mark and I are sitting here, GTN presenters. My wife is actually a British triathlon pathway coach, and she coaches 14 to 18-year-olds in the regional academy. So I know what I'm talking about when I say this. As a 14-year-old, work on your swimming. Okay, on with our next question, and it's from Aubrey Rodriguez. First and foremost, thank you for all the content. I come from a running background and I'm getting into triathlon. I'm hoping to PR in the marathon in February and then do a 70.3 in April to May. I'm quite weak on the bike though. Any ideas on how I can make power gains without compromising my running training too much? Time is not an issue and neither is swimming since it's no impact. Thanks in advance. For reference, I'm currently doing 1 running interval, 1 threshold, 2 easy runs, and 1 long run at the moment, and with 1 hard ride session during the week and a long ride on the weekend with 2 easy bike sessions. Sounds like a lot of sessions. It actually sounds like you're very much on the right track.
I'm going to say it sounds pretty good. I think the main thing to say is don't be afraid of keeping the cycling there and it perhaps actually affecting or ruining your running at times. You might just lack a bit of a zing, a kapow on your run that you kind of... I've never said that before, but a little bit of zing on your run and feeling light on your feet. And you can actually benefit still in that run from that, but also make sure that your cycles or your bike rides don't just become recovery rides after your hard run sessions. Yeah,
you actually have to put some effort into those bike rides to get that power gains. But as Mark says, you can do the run training. You might be a little bit slower, you might lack a little bit of kapow, but you are still getting the fitness. And then when you do taper and you take out that cycling for a couple of weeks before you do your marathon PR attempt, you will find that the running training is there, the speed is there, the strength is there, because you have trained it, even if you trained it for the most part on tired legs from also doing some cycling. And then of course, after the marathon, you're ready to go for that 70.3. So yeah, you can do both. Don't be afraid of doing a bit of running on do a bit of tired running. Now, you can also do cycling on very tired run legs. So don't be afraid of cycling hard on tired run legs, because cycling, you're locked into your pedals and it's not weight bearing. You're less injury prone to really kind of work hard on a bike session, even on tired run legs. So don't be afraid of, like as Mark says, don't make them all recovery rides because you're tired from a run. You can do some hard work.
The other thing as well you can consider is sort of alternating weeks. So a focus maybe on the weekend, for instance, you would focus on the run one week and you do that first, and then you'd maybe do the bike ride after. The next week you'd flip it round. The bike workout would be the focus, perhaps do that before the run workout. So you're getting an equal kind of attention on each of them. Another thing, as James has sort of touched on, you're trying to do a marathon here, which could warrant quite a big volume of running, which is quite hard to do, and actually you can benefit a lot from doing the cycling. We've seen a lot of triathletes actually perform incredibly well in marathons because of the fitness and strength that they're gaining from the cycling. It does translate to a degree or transfer over quite nicely to the
you get some aerobic gains without any of the impact of running. So bear that in mind. Okay, next question is from True North 90. I recently completed my first full Ironman and, as expected, was quite nervous for 24 hours before. This impacted my ability to eat and sleep properly, and I went into the swim without being properly fueled. How important is nutrition and rest the day before a big race? Is most of my energy coming from stores accumulated in the week prior? Hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. Well, yes, most of your energy for a race is coming from your stores in your body that you should have peaked as you tapered and took a little bit of a rest going into the race. However, those stores are always being used by your body and your brain, even when you are resting, even when you are sleeping, and especially when you are particularly anxious in the hours and days leading up to the race. So you do need to top them up. You cannot go into it having not eaten or drunk anything for 24 hours. Let's start with the sleep issue.
Yeah, now, being anxious or not being able to sleep before a race is incredibly common. Mm-hmm. And actually, it's not necessarily the night before that has the biggest impact. It's actually more the night before the race that actually can help you the most. And what you can do and may help you actually is by taking the pressure off yourself of that night before is just watching Netflix and accepting all right, if I don't get a good night's sleep tonight, it doesn't really matter. You may actually end up sleeping quite well as a result.
Sleep better if you stop trying to sleep so hard. If you've had a good night's sleep on the Friday night for a Sunday race, you're not actually worried about how much you sleep on the Saturday night. And because you're not worried about it, you find yourself passing out, no problem. So bear that in mind. And yeah, if you can't sleep the whole night, so if you do lie there staring at the ceiling, worrying about T2 or whatever it is you worry about, don't worry about it, because you literally won't affect your performance. Once you wake up and you get a coffee in you and a caffeine gel or two, you will completely forget that you hardly slept until after the race, and then you will really crash. Yeah. So don't worry too much about the sleep. As for the nutrition, it's perfectly normal to be anxious and not be able to eat in the hours before the race when you wake up, especially when it's stupidly early. No one really wants to wake up that early, and no one feels like eating at 4 o'clock in the morning. So that's normal. But you can compensate for this by taking something that you can absorb quite easily or get down your neck quite easily, such as a meal replacement shake, something that you can just swallow without actually even thinking about it. You don't have to sit there and force food into you. Or even choose something that you absolutely love and will eat no matter how anxious or nervous you are, such as birthday cake, for example.
Nice.
That's a pretty good breakfast, and most days you won't be allowed birthday cake for breakfast, so you may as well do it on race day.
Also, rather than thinking about these big meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner in the day, which can be quite overwhelming if you are anxious, break it down a little bit. Just think about small snacks and just have the odd cereal bar here and there, so you're still getting those calories and carbs in. Also, coping mechanisms, have meals or food whilst you've got friends and family around who aren't necessarily racing. They'll calm you and hopefully bring that down. Another thing also is, maybe in preparation of all this, if you know you struggle with this, is practice it in training. Do sort of simulation days, which will maybe make you a bit anxious and nervous, put a bit of pressure on it, or go and do some smaller races and practice your eating before, during. Hopefully you'll improve with it, but you'll also practice some of these methods.
Yeah, I think the point is you need to work out what works for you, a kind of coping strategy for that day before. Things that take your mind off the race so that you can relax, and then you won't have a problem eating, such as meeting friends and family and people who aren't interested in the race. Potentially is always a good thing. Go have a meal with someone who's got a small child because they wouldn't care about your race, for example. That kind of thing, so that you just relax that pressure. And then, other coping strategy. You shouldn't be having crippling anxiety 24 hours before the race. And if you are, work on some relaxation techniques, something that you can take your mind off the race for an hour or two so that you can calm down, and then you will feel like eating, and then you'll be fine for race day. And just get that birthday cake in on race morning, and you'll be good to go.
Hey.
All right, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you've answered your questions, and if you have your questions, remember, drop them below this video or any of our videos. Use the hashtag GTN Coaches Corner, and we will be answering your question on our next video. Thanks for watching.